And we're back, and it's COMP1002, and it's week 1, lesson 1, part 3. And we just kind of, the first kind of part was about the outline. Part 2 was really about tools that we're going to use and some stats. Talked about your favorite browsers and how browsers are compatible with HTML5, and what is that HTML5 thing anyway, and that's what we're going to get into with this part. Okay, we're about halfway through the day so far. All right, so let's get to it. So really, when we talk text content, and if I look at what text content is, right, in my browser, it's this stuff, right? It's like the stuff between the tags. So here's a tag, and here's another tag. And what are these tags anyway, right? We'll talk about that in a second. So here's some text that's in between the tags, right? And in between the tags, there's this stuff that you put in the content that we're going to try and consume, right? So if I didn't have any text on the browser at all, as an example, right, then, and if I didn't tag anything or I didn't mark anything up, when I say markup, it's actually adding these tags in there. So taking the tag and tagging this one and creating almost like a block, right? And on the programming side, we call it a code block, right? Well, my code block, and it's kind of nested, right? It starts off like this. I need a doc type, right? The doc type for my web page tells the browser how to interpret the website and see if it's compliant or not. If I don't have a doc type, then it kind of goes into quirks mode. That's what it's called, right? It doesn't know what to do, and it doesn't produce the web page in the same way, right? So that's really an important piece. If you notice, before, our doc types were massive. They were like XHTML, blah, 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 transitional, and so on, all kinds of other stuff in the doc type. And if you actually do create one with Dreamweaver or some other software, it'll ask you what kind of doc type you want. And you can actually go back to that HTML4 or XHTML doc type with a different kind of header here. Again, it tells a browser what to expect from the content that we're getting. So this doc type is the first thing. And then the first layer, this is the container. The first container that contains all of your content on the page is HTML, the HTML container. If you notice the tag itself, you use the less than and greater than sign here, right, to kind of encapsulate the tag. HTML, everything we write when we tag stuff is all lowercase. All right, so that's one of the things to note, right? So HTML. And if you notice, if I go way, way to the bottom of this stuff, so you get all kinds of other stuff, content, and at the bottom, some kind of funny thing here. This is some comment, right? On the bottom, you have this closing tag. So you have two tags, an opening tag and a closing tag, right? Now, the content inside and all of the attributes, and we'll talk about what attributes are for HTML5 and so on, inside of the tag and included in the tag, make up an element, right? So the element itself, we talk element if we're going to talk about terminology for us, right? Tag is just, you know, HTML or H1 or whatever we're going to talk about. Element includes the tag, the text, and any attributes, right? That's what an element is. So when you get tested on that, by the way, that will be on an exam. I might ask you that as in a poll next week. We'll see if you guys are attentive, right? That's what the difference between a tag and an element is. Okay, so let's go back up here. So HTML then encompasses, or we call it encapsulates all the text and the markup that's inside of our page, just the HTML tag itself. So that's like the root node, if you will, the parent of all the parents on the page. So you have your document itself, then you have your HTML tag that encapsulates everything. That's the code block for your page. And inside there you have two other big tags, right? The first one is a head section, right? Your head section, it really talks to your browser. It's almost like a administrative section. I always like to think of your website, right? So your web page talks to the browser and says in the head section, what I'm linking to, if there's any links to other pages or other kind of information, style sheets, JavaScript, whatever, right? That's in the head of your document typically. And we'll talk about, sometimes we put JavaScript, and for the most part we do now, in the bottom of your body tag, because sometimes JavaScript can be blocking. We'll talk about that later on in the course, what that means. But for the most part, I want you to remember that the head section is almost like the control section. So think about it, control. If I can control my web page, I do a lot of that. I set that up almost like page setup is happening in the head of my document, right? And then, so if you notice, there's the opening tag, less than and greater, or yeah, less than and greater than sign. And then the closing tag, when we have closing tags, it's a less than, a slash, right? And sometimes this slash is optional, by the way, right? And then the same name for the tag, right? So this is the opening tag, and this is the closing tag. If you know XML, XML takes on the same kind of quality. In fact, HTML and XML are related in that originally HTML wasn't like this. It took on almost like this. That's why it was called XHTML. Eventually turned into just plain HTML again, because it took on this whole XML type markup language, ML, markup language, HTML, hypertext markup language. That's what it stands for. And so this markup, we're marking up our document to make it the browser, which is our viewport, understand what we want to produce on the web, right? All right, so our body tag is where all of our content is going to be displayed. We put stuff in the head, doesn't get displayed on the page. The body tag, from here until the end, just above the HTML tag, let's skip all the way to the bottom here. See? The body tag, right, contains all of our content. Okay, so that's one thing to know. So again, we have doc type. It's very important. And in order for us to put doc type, it's in caps, right? So it's like a tag. It is a tag. And we have a less than sign, exclamation mark, doc type, the keyword doc type, and then what our doc type have. Well, there's different ones we can use, right? HTML signifies it's HTML, the latest version of HTML. In this case, is HTML5. Tomorrow, it could be HTML6. It doesn't say HTML6 or HTML5. It just says HTML, because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, right? It used to be different. It used to be HTML 4.01 Why would we do that? That makes no sense, right? We're going to continue. The web moves so quickly. This makes more sense for us. Okay, so again, HTML. In the head, we have several other tags. Notable ones are meta tags that talk to the browser, and that's the control I was talking about. Controlling the browser, how certain things appear, and how it's interpreted, especially things like character set and compatibility, and so on, right? And also things that help or assist in SEO, search engine optimization, right? We put some of that stuff in the head of the document, right? But one of the most important tags in there is the title tag, right? And the title element itself, which would be the title tag and the text that's inside the title, right? Title element, right? So why? Because again, this helps us with SEO, right? We identify to the user the title of our page, and again, you would see that if I was going to go back to the web, right? So you notice, like, it's where it says live events YouTube. That will be in the title of my page. Now that's dynamically generated in this case, right? But in our case, we're making a static page, right? And the title tag is what's going to tell us what the title of our page is going to be. Then we have some links. This particular one, I'm not going to go into detail right away, but this particular one, it basically links our main CSS style sheet into our page. That's what it does. And what the browser does is it goes through line by line. So if I start at line number 1, it starts reading this, because remember, the HTML isn't a compiled language, right? It's not like C# or C++ or C or Java. It's an interpreted language, right? So I go through and I go, I'm going to read the doc type, and then I'm going to read HTML, and then I know that I have an opening. This is part of my code block. Okay, now I know I'm expecting it ahead of my document. My browser expects that. So here's my head. Okay, now what's in the head? Okay, good. Read all that. Okay, now go to the body. Now read everything in order. That's what the browser does, and it reads everything in order. So when you produce a page, you want to put it more or less in the order that you want visitors to see it. Okay, now with some changes. That I'm giving it kind of broad strokes there, but that's really it in a nutshell, right? So, so the browser reads step by step, line by line, and then it gets into the body tag, right? So here's our body tag, and starts reading those things one by one. And if you notice, some things get marked up even more, right? So you've got this, what looks like a heading, right? That's marked up with an H1. H1 is heading 1, stands for heading 1. We're going to talk about headings as well. I'm just giving you a really high level one on this one. And it has a default style. Hey, notes about default style. All browsers, no matter what, have a default style that's built into them, right? So if I use a browser, if I use some H1, H2, the browser knows what H1 and H2 means, right? It'll give me a certain, if you will, or pixel size for my my text or my type that's being put into my my H1 tag, right? So in the middle of my H1 tag, in this element here is my element. I've got two tags, my opening tag and my closing tag. I'm repeating myself a bunch of times so you get the difference between elements and tags. So inside the text node of the element, right, which is this piece here, you can see that we have some type. And again, if you're a marketing person, you might know type. We talk type or body content, if you were, as an example. Body copy might be the other way you can think about it as well. This is part of the body copy, and what it is when we say body copy, we mean that this is the content that's inside of it. It's just a headline, right, or heading. So getting started with brackets is the first headline or important headline. And then we have a subheading, H2, right, which is another heading, but a lower level heading with a smaller pixel size, that this is your guide, right? And then from there, we have some comments. And again, comments are ignored. We're going to talk about that. And you open up comments like this, less than, exclamation mark, dash, dash, and then you close it off with a dash, dash, greater than sign. And anything in the middle of those things, the interpreter that's part of the browser ignores this. It's only for us as developers to look at that, right? Just like we normally would do for programming in C#. Who's going to do C# rapid application development? Is it this semester or next semester? I don't know, for you guys. So you guys are taking that at some point. That's COMP1002, I think it is, right? You guys don't even know, right? No. But you will be taking C#. C# is going to learn forms with C# and rapid application development with Visual Studio. And you're going to learn about commenting. When we do programming at all, we put internal comments. And again, I'm assuming, by the way, please forgive me for people who have programmed before. I'm assuming you know nothing, all right? So that's why I'm saying these things to you. We use comments in our code that's ignored by the browser, in this particular case, or the compiler if we're actually coding something out, right? And it's not for someone else, it's for us, right? It's for the developer to look to see what's happening here. Okay, so here's a comment made with love, right, in JavaScript, it looks like. That's what they're probably trying to say here, right? So this whole thing is made with JavaScript, this brackets thing, right, which I kind of like. Now we come to a paragraph tag. That's what the P stands for, a paragraph tag, right? An opening tag, again, you see the pattern, and a closing tag. And inside of there, you have your text. You have your copy, if you will, or your content. So welcome to brackets, blah, blah, blah. And there's the paragraph. Now, you don't have to put a paragraph inside of a paragraph tag, but it's good practice. It's best practice to put all of your text at the very minimum within a tag, like between two tags, the paragraph tag, and to create this paragraph element. Why is that? Because what happens is you get some basic styling, and the browser understands what you want to do there, right? You're telling the browser that this is part of my content, right? From an SEO perspective, search engine optimization, when the search engine looks for certain content, right? Putting stuff in the right places. And we're going to talk about semantic HTML and so on as well, what that is. It helps with, from a search perspective, finding content on the web, right? So it's important that we use the right methodologies or best practices in order for us to lay out our web or our content on the web. Other things here, the M tag really says it's really about emphasis or bold. It kind of bolds out our tag, and you'll see that. It could also, depending on the browser, it might also italicize. Let's see what it does if I try and do this live preview, which didn't seem to work last time. It doesn't work, for me anyway. So let's take a look at that and what it's doing. If I skip down here, right, and if I see what it says is brackets will open a live connection to your browser, live being italicized in connection, live connection, right? And if I skip down here, right, after it has that, and if I want to try and find where that piece is, you'll see that EM, emphasis, as an example, will italicize in this particular case. Now, you can use, and most often than not, I'll tell you right now, best practice for us is to kill all the basic styles in a browser. That's what I would normally do, right? And use something like a normalizer or what we say a reset for the CSS. Now, there are two camps on this, right? Some people say, no, don't kill the browser defaults. That's bad, Tom, because that means you have to do extra work to create all your styles. You'll see what I'm talking about. I will kill the browser in a second. You'll see that it won't give you any style. It'll just be like plain text all the way down, right? in this, I use my own CSS, cascading style sheets, or apply a style to my browser, then it'll be completely dead, right? It'll be empty, right? It'll be actually just text that's all put together. It doesn't matter whether I say a paragraph or whatever, it kills the style altogether. But best practices tell us we need to kill the style. Why? We want to reset the style and have control over what's happening. So that way, it's not going to trick us. So we get the same experience, consistent experience between browsers. If I let the browser dictate my styles, even a little bit, that means what's going to happen is that something I think is going to happen, it's not going to be what you see is what you get. It's not a WYSIWYG experience, right? It's going to be, I think it's going to, I'm assuming that this is going to happen. And we don't want to assume anything in programming, right? I'm not going to go and tell you what the assume word stands for, right? But at the end of the day, right, no one wants to make an ass out of themselves. Let's put it that way, right? So don't assume anything. We want to kill the browser styles. The way to do that is to include something called a reset, CSS reset. And we'll talk about that later on as we get closer to the CSS side of the course. Okay, so that's what this stuff is. So as we go through, I'm not going to go through every piece of the website, but you can see what's happening here. We mark up the web page by putting tags, and inside the tag, there's a text node. That's what I like to call it. And inside the text node is the content that we're marking up that's going to be displayed on the website. How do I use brackets anyway? Right now, I've just kind of loaded this website from scratch. I'm just going to kill this for a second. And you know what? I want to kill all this stuff. Like here's some stuff that I've got in brackets. How do I use it on the Mac or on Windows, right? That's important to note too. I mean, I've talked about it, but I haven't used it yet. Well, two things I would do is I would create a folder. So let's do this together. So maybe you want to use your desktop, or you want to use your some other place on your machine, right? So here's my folder, and let's call it. I'm going to call this thing, rename this thing for a second, and let's just call it something like comp. Oops, that would be really bad. Hold on a second. I love this. I love the Mac. So let's just call it COMP1002, and then the folder is going to be called lesson 01, right? And the great thing about brackets, I have this folder now, right? And if I drag this folder in here, guess what? Now my folder, which is empty, right, is going to be physically, brackets is pointing to this folder. I don't have to open up brackets and try and open the folder up. Let me show you that again, right? So I'm going to just kill brackets for a second, right? And I'm going to reopen it up. Now it's going to go back when I open it up again to my last folder that I was working on, which is this one, right? And all I've done is I've dragged and dropped it onto brackets. That's what I've done in order for me to go in here. Now this folder is empty. There's nothing in here whatsoever, right? So how do I add stuff in here? Well, I can do new file. If I go to, we're using brackets, I go new file, and I can name this file whatever I want. So typically, the first page of your website should be one of the following. If you're using a non-ASP.NET, non-Visual Studio, Windows kind of environment, it should be index, okay? Index. So we start typing index. In the past, we used to have either HTML as an extension or HTML. I'd like you to stick with HTML for us for this the time we're together. All right, HTML. Index.html. And index.html basically tells us that this is an HTML page. And if you notice on the bottom here, where there's different kinds of pages that I can bring up, right? Different kinds of markup, if you will. It shows us what the just talked about this, right? What's next? Marissa, I'm going to bother you because you've got my daughter's name. Come on, Marissa, tell me a story, right?
Like, normally for me, I just add like the separate HTML link.
You could, but what's the next tag? If I was going to build up my page from scratch, what would be the next tag that I need, right? So I'm building my page from scratch. I want you guys to know how to do it from scratch with nothing, right? From a text editor, which is what I'm using this like right now. Yeah, HTML. That's what I'm using. So HTML. So look, it's giving me the example. I'm getting some some code hinting here, right, of what I want, right? So I'm going to end it off, and guess what it does for me? Brackets gives me the closing tag at the same time, and any good editor will do that for you, right? I'm going to kind of put an enter in here, right? So HTML is the kind of enclosing tag, right? Okay, what's the next one? I just talked about this, yeah. You have a question? Yeah. You can't get a file start. You can't go right-click. Can't right-click and start a file. Right-click, new file. All right. I'll have to come around and talk to you about it afterwards, okay? Bear with me then. Thing I need. Huh? The meta tag. Do I put that now or do I put that somewhere else? I need body. Body's after. What's the next tag I put in before underneath my HTML? Yeah. Head. Head controls the body. No head? It's like a headless chicken. Doesn't know what to do, right? Cut the head off a zombie, it's dead, right? Same thing, right? Cut the head off a page, doesn't know what to do. Please don't cut the head off my page, right? That's what I like to say. So let's do that. So let's put the head tag. Now the meta tags will be good. I like that, what you're thinking about there. What's that? Why does it space in? Why the indentation? Oh, I didn't program anything different here. It's supposed to tab in, right? It's supposed to organize your page that way, right? But what it does, the reason why it's indenting is it's kind of showing that the head tag or element is inside or nested within the HTML element, all right? Now the next one is what you said already. I'm not going to go. It's painful to go through each one, but body is the next one. Okay, so I've got my head, my body tag, and so on. I need to put a couple things in here. The first thing I'd always want you to do when we program together is put in a meta tag, right? The meta tag, not a meat tag, a meta tag, right? The first one is, and if you notice there's some options, is character set. I want to kind of choose character set. And see what I just did there? I double clicked. Let me just undo that, right? So I start typing character set here. I can do that. Let's go from the meta tag from the beginning. Meta tag, and then it gives me some options. If I double click on something like character set, right, it's going to produce it, or I can type it. So character set, and it's almost like a search, right? It's searching for the closest tag, you know, when I start programming. So it's character set. Now I know what I want. I want character set as UTF-8, right? There's different ways to do that. It's UTF-8 is fine, right? UTF in capitals 8. It needs to be some kind of UTF. Then I want to close off the body, the meta tag, right? How does it work? Do I need a backslash here? Because normally what you have is a tag like this, right? Let's leave it like this and see what happens without the backslash, right? All right, so that's the first thing. I got a meta tag, and what does this tell me? This meta tag says interpret all the entire character set as the standard UTF-8 character set that's ASCII compliant. That's what it's saying. It's telling the browser. That's why the head controls the body, right? I want you to think about that. Okay, next one is, you mentioned head. What's the next one? Title, right? Title is a really important one from SEO perspective, right? So we want to put a title tag in there. I'm going to double click this time, and didn't work. But let's just put a title in there and put it. Programmers, we expect this stuff. We're not going to put in CSS at this point, okay? Because there's no CSS I want you to think about right now, okay? And we're going to leave it with no CSS, just the default styles in the browser. And inside the body tag, I want to have some other stuff, right? So how do we separate stuff out? Well, I need to have some kind of title, right? So let's say my title is going to be within an H1 tag, right? So I'm going to start typing less than H1. You see it comes up. And if I close it off, it gives me my closing tag. And I'm going to put in a heading one of, you know, maybe hello world, huh? Hello world. And then I want to put a paragraph tag, right? Here's my paragraph tag. And a paragraph, remember, it doesn't have to be a paragraph. Any content at the very minimum should be within a paragraph tag. You don't want to leave content out in the open. To me, content out in the open is like naked content, right? You don't want to be naked, right? So I remember that. If you want to be naked, don't put a tag around it. It's naked. I can't do anything with it. I can't target it. I can't do anything, right? It's just naked. It'll populate on the website, but you have no control. Why would I do that? Put it inside a paragraph tag at the very minimum. So, you know, this is my first web page, you know, kind of thing. Here we go. My first web page. All right, cool. I'm on the Mac, so I'm going to use Command S, Control S on the PC. I'm going to try the live preview here and see what happens, right? This is my page. It's not going to be a brackets page. Hey, there's hello world, right? There's hello world on my live page. Let's see if I swap to it and I make a change. This is my first web page, and I'll say in there, you know, it won't be my last, right? Won't be my last. Look what's happening on the live preview, right? Let's save it, and then bam, right? So it's already done, right? That's why it's a good editor. Brackets is good because it gives me this live update, right? As long as I don't close the browser down, I'm getting live preview. So if I make a change, look what it's done actually. Wherever I'm kind of on, right? Let's see if I can do this for you. So you see what I'm talking about. Here's my page. See if I can do this without breaking the preview here. Bear with me, right? So here's my page, right? And then here's brackets. And then, you know, if I click on an area, like look, I'm clicking on the head, but there's no effect here, right? But what if I click the hello world, right? Then the hello world area is highlighted. It's telling me where I am. Here's my paragraph tag. It's telling me what my paragraph tag looks like right now. And if you notice, there's some separation between my hello world and my paragraph tag, and that's the fault of the default styles of my browser, all right? It's a fault. It's not a good thing that it's happening this way, in my opinion. I'm of that camp, right? There's two camps, right? I'm of the camp that, don't shoot me now, but I'm of the camp that I don't believe in default styles. I think you should kill the default styles. Okay, so, but for now we're gonna leave them because otherwise it would totally screw you guys up if you saw it. It would just be like flat, right? And we wouldn't want that. Okay, so cool, so I've done this kind of stuff. And this is cool, but imagine if I have to type all this stuff out over and over again, man. It's a pain in the ass, right? I mean, I gotta type this thing out. So what people do is they create templates. Right? They have this HTML. They don't want to type this out. They leave some of this stuff in there. And then what we do is we go in and replace. So that's a little faster when we create a web page than typing all this stuff out from scratch, right? But you need to know how to do it. You need to know what it looks like. A couple things. When we access stuff on our web page, right, inside of our page, our folder structure, right, I want to keep deadly organized because I'm going to have lots of pages. I never have just, well, I take that back. I almost never have only one page on a website, unless I'm a continuous, you know, one-page website. That's my style that I want to put in there. But I have a lot of other content and everything else that links to my page, usually like images. Might have movies. Hopefully, they just point to YouTube and stuff like that. They're not embedded. Embedding is bad, right, for SEO and all that kind of stuff, and also it looks bad. But let's just say there's a bunch of content there that I want to link to my page, right? I need to organize that, or my page, my file structure is going to be a mess, right? And as developers, you know what? I know I have my kids, right? And they're really messy. They keep their rooms really messy. I go into the room and I'm like, damn, I don't know how they sleep in this room. There's no sheets on the bed. You know, they got nothing, right? I don't want to see no sheets on the bed when I look at your website, okay? I mean that. I want you to be organized. I want you to think about someone else is going to look at your room here, right? So when you start organizing your folders, the first thing we do is make a root folder like I just did, called COMP1002, whatever your website or your project is going to be called. The next piece you need to do is kind of organize the folders within the folder, right? Your nested folders. So let's do that now. Let's just make some folders as if we had lots of content. We don't have anything right now, but let's make this a best practice. Now there's a couple ways we can do this. One is I'm going to right click, I'm going to go new folder. I can do it here, right? But brackets is so intuitive, right? That if I do that within my on my page itself, let's go into the next page here. So here's my folder structure, and if you notice, look, I got this index.html page that was generated by brackets, right? I could do it here from a folder view. On the Windows side, you could use Windows Explorer or File Explorer to create your folder structure the way you like. Brackets will pick it up if you've connected it to brackets. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I want a place where all my CSS, my cascading style sheets, are going to live, right? So there's a couple ways I can do that. I could create a new folder. I could call it CSS, right? And you see some web designers do that. Microsoft calls it content, right? For now, let's just call it content, right? We can call it CSS if you like as well. That's another alternative, content. And you know what? I also have another folder usually that I have called assets. You notice I'm using capitals here, assets, right? So I've got assets, that could be images, sounds, fonts, whatever, and I've got content, okay? Two different things. And again, we can make this, sometimes you'll see this as CSS, right? And you might have another folder that's in there for other kinds of web pages that you want to split off. Like for example, if you have a whole administrative section, you might call it admin, you know, or something else. You want to create a structure for your folders, right? So when you scaffold your application, I'll use these terms, and you're going to hear me say these things over and over again. When you build out your application, you have the same style every time, right? So you create your folder style. Okay, so good. Now I've done these two things, and I want to create one more. Inside my assets, I have nothing, right? I want to kind of double click in here, or on the Windows side, you do something similar. I'm going to go new folder, and in my folder, I want to put in a couple of other ones. In lowercase, images, right? That's what I want to put in. Another folder, maybe audio. I'm probably not going to ever have audio. If you have audio on your website, something's wrong, okay? Nowadays, if I hear audio on a website, I'm like, kill that website, right? Who does that anymore? Unless you're like selling music, forget it. I don't want to hear it, right? It's kind of passe now. And maybe one more, I'll call it fonts, right? So audio, fonts, and images. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go back up here a little bit, back up the chain. And if you notice, the root of my folder, here's my folder. My root folder is called COMP1002 lesson 01. And I have nested within my folder, I have assets and content. Right now, there's nothing in my content folder, right? Let's see what happens with brackets. What does brackets think about this? So I'll go back to brackets. Yeah. It's pretty good that way, right? It understands it. It's watching what's happening on my files, right? So I don't have to go in, whatever I do in one system happens in the other one right away. This is really cool. I don't have to, if I do it on brackets, it happens on the file system, right? So it's what really is what you see is what you get. Okay, cool. So I've got a couple things here. I'm going to make some placeholders. We're going to use some placeholders today, right? We're not going to use these files, but I'm going to create them with you to get you used to doing it, as if you guys are experts, okay? So let's go into content, right? I'm going to right-click on top of content here, right? And I'm going to go new file on my content. And I'm going to add in something we're going to call main.css. Now, we don't have any CSS, but it creates another file for us, right? Take a look at the hierarchy here. Here's our outliner, right? I've got a couple of files open right now. This brackets is showing me the two files that are open. One, that's index.html. If I click on there, it gives me what it shows me in index.html. And main CSS is my CSS page that's blank right now, because we're not going to use CSS right now. But I want to show you that the file exists, right? Okay, cool. Let's put a comment. Follow me here. Don't worry about why it's being done or how it's being done. Just follow me here. I want to put a comment in here that looks very similar to that future CSS file here. That's what we're going to put in. We don't have anything to put in here right now. We're just going to use this as a future file, and we're going to save this file, right? So it's there. It's just empty. But it's a placeholder, right? So it's inside of our content. Okay, let's switch back to our folder structure and see what that looks like. Hey, look, main CSS is here, right? So main CSS is just popped in there, right? So I've created it in brackets. Boom, it's in our it's in our folder structure. So folder structure, I always look at it like your room, right? If your room is ugly, right? When I do your marks, that's bad. I give you ugly marks, right? I want you to, one part of what I look at is your structure, right? You got to be very orderly. And the reason for that is when we get big, when we start building out our stuff, we build out these different projects, right? What happens is, you know, things can get messy fairly fast. So I don't want you to do that. I want you to get to be organized from the get-go. All right. So folder structure is important. All right, cool. So let's go back to here, right? So here we go. We're going to kind of not look at this right now. We're going to kill this off, right? But I want to link to my I want to link in to my CSS page. How do I do that, right? So I want to kind of create a link into my page. I usually do that here in the head of the document, right? So here's something to ask you guys, right? If you guys have done this before, how do I link? Does anyone know how to link to my web page? How do I link my CSS? I mean, you guys have done, some of you have done HTML before, right? Kayla, you've done CSS before, so yeah. I know I'm going to challenge you guys. So how do you link my CSS file to my web page? How do I do that? Do you know? The code? Come on, right? Now, none of you are supposed to be sure. Don't worry about that. I'm not expecting you to know, right? But it's in the head, right? For sure. Yeah. But what do I put in here? I'm going to open up a thing. Like, there's different things that it's giving me. Audio, area. It's going to give me things that are pertinent to up here, right? Sometimes. But then sometimes it'll give me stuff like this, like H1. You know, it doesn't make any sense, right? I want something else that links me in here. Is it the link tag that I use? How do I know what to put in there? Yeah. Is it styles that I use? What is it? That's a link, but I want to, that's a hyperlink. But I want to link my page to my other page. Yeah. That's my, you know, okay, fine. That's part of the link, right? But I want to create my whole element. My element's made up of two things: tags, opening tag and closing tag, attributes like an rel, right, or href, right, or an a tag, whatever it's going to be inside sometimes, and then some information. So how do I know this? What if I don't know? What do I do? Well, there's a great website that I always like to refer you to. And I'm not going to tell you this is the only place to look, but W3 Schools, right, is a nice little resource for that, right? Here it is. If I go to W3 Schools, if you forget how to do this stuff, first it gives you two things. It gives you this HTML example right off the get-go if you don't know where it is. It's got some great free tutorials, right, on this website as well. Some really cool tutorials. And I'm going to be referring to this almost like an API specification for HTML and CSS. I'm telling you right now, this is the place we're going to look at more than we look at the book, right? Why? It's online, it's up to date, and sometimes websites are more up to date than the book, right? Because things change so often, right? And I can always do a search, right? So if I'm going to search for something and I say something like link CSS page, how do I do that, right? And then it's like CSS how to, the HTML link tag. It gives me some options here, and it's using Google to do this. So I have a couple of options here. Let's look at the first one and see what it tells us to do, right? So it says 3 ways to insert CSS. We can use an external style sheet, an internal style sheet, or an inline style. The last two, boo-ah. I don't want ever to see this stuff ever. We're going to talk about how to do it, but it's like poor form. It's like we don't do that kind of stuff ever, right? But here's the, kind of the code snippet that we can use, right? So this is what we need. We need a link. Rel is the type of thing that we're linking, which is the style sheet. Type is text or CSS. Then href is the attribute that points to where the style sheet exists in our folder structure. Okay, now this is going to change relative to how I've laid out my folder structure. Right now, my content is where my main CSS is. So let's see how that looks to me. And I'm going to start typing this in brackets. Okay, let's try this out. So I'm going to say link, right? I'm going to say rel, right, is equal to, and look what it gives me. It gives me a bunch of different things here. Author, blah, 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 style sheet. Okay, and I double click that. That's one thing I want. Rel is equal to style sheet, right? And then type, I want to put type is equal to text CSS. It kind of picks that up right away. So I kind of put that in there. It's helping me type this out. By the way, forgive my wrapping because I'm trying to keep two things up at the same time, right? And then my link, I have to kind of have this, href or some kind of link, right? That links me onto this next page, right? If you notice there's an href tag, we're going to see the href tag again, href attribute, sorry. And if I say is equal to, right, now where is my main CSS? Well, it's in content. Take a look. When I start typing content, because I know what my folder structure is like here on the left-hand side, I can see my main.css is there. Brackets is smart enough to know that I mean content. So if I double click on content, I'm in there now, and I can start typing in other things. Like, for example, main, take a look. It actually suggests main.css to help me complete my path. And I'm going to kind of close that off, right? Let's take a look. Do I have to put in a link or some kind of backslash here? Well, W3C Schools, all right, W3 Schools tells us no, right? It's not necessary for me to put a closing backslash. It's unnecessary. It's optional, actually, and it's not going to be misinterpreted by the browser. Okay, let me save this thing, right? And let's go back to my live reload, my live page here. Let's take a look at this thing and see if anything's changed. Well, let's refresh. So I kind of did this. And let's see if it's still connected. We're still connected, so it's taken in my style sheet and everything still works, but there's no change. Why? I haven't applied any new styles. My style sheet is linked, and I want you to understand this. We haven't talked about styles yet, but I want you to understand the order of loading from a browser perspective. It kind of comes through, loads everything, it's already loaded my main CSS. It's done that already, right? How do I know that? Well, one thing to do is right-click on the web page, right, and go view page source. You actually do that at any time, right? It actually shows you the data, right? Now this is weird because my doc type is showing a bunch of different things here. Why? Because this is a live page. So it's showing me things like data brackets ID is equal to 2 and so on. Why? Because this is brackets, how brackets is showing the page. But if I go to any other web page, let's say for example I go here and I right click and I go view page source, I get how it's loading, and I get the page and what I see in it. I see the whole page. I see the doc type, which is HTML. I get, hey, wait a minute, I got this lang is equal to English. What's up with that, right? We're going to talk about that in a bit. SEO again, right? And then here's my head, right? The head of my document, my title, CSS how to, bunch of meta tags, a title tag somewhere in there, which is here, and in a different section. You can put meta tags before or after, and then some links, right? My style sheet's right here. So this is what it would look like if I've got my style sheet linked to it, right? Okay, cool. What if something goes wrong? What if something's not working properly and I want to inspect the page in a different way? What other tools do I have? Well, because they're primarily using Chrome, because everyone loves Chrome, right, in this class, let's use the Chrome tools, right? So another thing to do is hit this hamburger, and by the way, this is called the hamburger or sandwich, right, for some people who don't know, right? You click on this thing, and you go down to more tools. Follow me here, right? And then you want to hit developer tools. This is one way of getting it, right? And when I go to developer tools, I see that the bottom of my page, let's bring this to the middle here, and I'll expand this for you so you can see it. The bottom of my page shows me some of the stuff I've got. Now, it's interpreting things a little differently. It's not really data brackets, HTML, and so on. Brackets is a live reload, so it's producing this page. That's what the page looks like to brackets, because it's watching the page from a scanning perspective. But really, that's not what it is. It's just HTML tags and so on. But look what it's giving me here. I've got a style that's on the right-hand side, and I never put any styles in there. Well, yeah, there's no style sheet, but remember, it's got the default styles. I'm repeating myself again, of the browser. So here's a question for you. You know, does a browser have default styles? Every browser has their own default styles, and that would be a true-false question. The answer is true, right? If you say false, it doesn't have a default style, you're wrong. It's true. I can prove it to you right here, right? So here's my default style. I've got a block, display is block, and my margin is 8 pixels. That's why my text isn't abutting the edge of the screen here, right? Because it's added 8 pixels of margin, pushing me in from the left-hand side here, 8 pixels, right? That's the default style that's embedded for my browser. I didn't put that in, right? Okay, this is cool. This is one way of doing it. How about the other way? I could do it this way. I could right-click anywhere and go inspect. And it does the same thing. It kind of brings me into this HTML page, and I can skip down, and I can see the nodes, each of these elements that are nested within the main HTML element. I can inspect these. And in a regular page, other than a brackets page, it would look like a regular website. So it wouldn't have data brackets in it. The data brackets attribute has been injected into the elements from brackets, so we can do a live reload. That's what it's for. Okay. They also have an error here. Take a look. We have an error. This little X here shows me that there's an error, and it says fail to load resource. Fail to load resource, it says. The server responded with a status of 404 favicon not found, right? Why? Because always the page is looking for a favicon, a favorite icon that you're going to put up that comes up here next to my hello world. Hello world, and then some kind of favicon, right? Okay. Questions so far? I know I'm kind of going quick, right, for this kind of thing. So what do we talk about here? Let's go back to brackets for a second. Again, we say that our code is marked up, right? And see, it says live preview was canceled because I messed around with my stuff. Let's not close any of this because it would destroy my session. But let's talk about this. I'm going to close this off and redo my reloads. If you notice, it gives me the message that live reload is dead. But then when I start it up again, then it'll be okay. Okay, so here's my hello world. This is cool, right? But I'm missing one element that I saw that I like, which is lang. Put this in. Lang is equal to English, right? Because that kind of specifies that my language is English. So that's definitely a standard, especially with HTML5, standard HTML5 markup. We want to put that in there. One other meta tag that I would always put in every page as a default, a template, if you will, which is the meta tag that we don't have in here. And it's something new for you guys. Meta, right? And again, its name is equal to viewport. You don't have to remember this right now, right? And content is equal to, this is the big long one, width is equal to device dash width, initial scale. You're going to see this again and again, so don't worry, is equal to 1. Right? So what does this do, right? Now, I've just updated it, no change to the page. What this does is it says, to all the other browsers, let me make this bigger for you to see it, so you can see it in all its glory here, right? This is what it looks like, right? This meta tag here says, hey, regardless of the viewport, whatever it is, whether it's a phone, right, tablet, desktop, whatever the width of the device is, make that the width variable that I'm going to be accessing. Why is that good? Because now, if I change widths, it's going to reflow my content into a different viewport, right? Whereas, if you don't have this meta tag, it doesn't know what to do with the width. It thinks the width is a standard number or some kind of undefined number, right? So it's really, really important, super important in this responsive world to put in this meta tag, right? So this is kind of your template, if you will, right? Hey, typing out all these H1 elements and all this kind of stuff is cool, right? But isn't there kind of a faster way to do stuff? There is, and we're going to talk about that in the future. Let's say I want to kind of add in another sub-element in there, like an H2 tag, right, as an example, right? And I want to add in a paragraph tag, and I want to add in some stand-in text so I don't have to type all this stuff out like a big paragraph, because I want to kind of plan out my page. How do I do that really quickly? Let's try this, see if this works. H2, greater than sign, paragraph, greater than sign, lorem 100. What did I do there, right? Brackets, baby. That's what I just did, right? Let me undo that again to see what I did there. H2, greater than sign, P, greater than sign, lorem 100. Let's make that lorem 50. I don't like that's too much. Done. So what am I really doing there? It's a shorthand, right? I'm teaching you a shorthand from the get-go. It's called emit. All right, let's go to this emit side, because this is kind of the ancillary technologies that I got to teach you, because I'm Tom, I'm not Scott, right? This is what I do all the time when I program, right? Let's look at emit. Right, emit.io. It's built into brackets, right? And if I want to download this thing, as an example, you can see that it's compatible with all your favorite IDEs out there. It's compatible with Sublime, Eclipse, if you're an Eclipse person, if you want, because that also can be used as a good text editor. NetBeans, here's brackets already built in. Dreamweaver, not really that great functionality. I'll tell you right now, in Dreamweaver, I've tried it before. Visual Studio has it built into this. It's Visual Studio Web Essentials. If you like Visual Studio, you have to download another extension called Visual Studio Web Essentials, and it's actually called Zen Coding on the Visual Studio side. But it does exactly the same thing. It actually adds in some built-in functionality for shortcuts, if you will. Right, that's what it does. And it actually has some documentation of how this works. So if you want to find out what this does, emit, you can watch a little demo video, right? Or you can actually look at some of the getting started documentation, the syntax. So here we go, abbreviations, right? Here's an abbreviation for a page, and it tells you what it translates to, right? So if you actually look at emit, there's some really good documentation about how to do your shorthand. Why emit? Hey, let's think about this. I tell you to type out a page on a test. Do you want to type it out by hand, or do you want to do it like this? Less errors, right? Finger typing errors and stuff for me as well is I use emit, right? I can scaffold a page twice as fast, 5 times as fast somehow. You just saw that. There's no way I could type 50 characters in a paragraph in 2 strokes. There's just no way, right? And they have a lot of other things you can do with emit. Well, that's cool. What else can we do with it? I just typed all this stuff out. Let me just undo, right? What if let me take this whole thing out here for a second. What if I just did this? If I said HTML and then dash, that just gives me the HTML element, right? If I do HTML5 and dash, does that do anything? No, right? Sometimes what happens is you can get extensions for emit, especially in something like Sublime, right? And every text editor is slightly different. Where I type in HTML5 and it gives you a template, bam, it just gives you all this stuff, right? From almost like from a get-go, right? Like for example, if you're familiar with Bootstrap, I could type in some places Bootstrap, and then type that in, and boom, it kind of comes up, right? In this particular case, the great thing about brackets is it's a minimalist in kind of a structure, and it gives us all the stuff we need. So if I want to kind of create body tags and paragraph tags and stuff like that again, I could do it very simply. Here's an example of this. So let me get rid of this stuff. right? And show you what it's like to do it just from here. Then I'll give you your little exercise before you go, okay? Let's start off. So I'm going to say body greater than sign, which means the body, whatever I'm going to put after the greater than sign is contained with or a child of the previous element, right? So body, paragraph tag, H1, right? Inside my H1 tag, I mean, it's going to be, and I'm putting curly braces for the text node, right? That's the shorthand. Hello world, right? Okay, there's that. Now, greater than sign means it's a child of. A plus means it's a sibling of, like a brother sister on the same level, in other words, right? So I need to put a plus here for my paragraph tag, right? Plus P, right? And then greater than sign inside the P, or I could say contained in the P if I want to do it that way as well. You know, this is my first web page. Won't be my last. Do the same thing. So it's all in one line, right? Let's see if that works. So I don't have to type in the structure. I don't have to think about tabbing in. I don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. What does it do for me if I press tab now, right? It does exactly what I did before, right? Now some of you might say, that's cheating. You shouldn't teach us that. You should teach us how to do H1 tags and body tags from scratch. We're going to learn that. But I'd rather you type quickly, right? Keep up is what I'm saying. I'm going to be able to type this quickly and scaffold the page out to give some examples really, really fast. And I'm going to use Emmet. Emmet exists on most browsers, most text editors and IDEs, especially in Visual Studio. And again, in Visual Studio, it's called Zen coding. Okay.
I might be missing a key.
Tab. You tab. When you go to the end, if you guys haven't seen that, to kick it off, you got to tab. When you kick this whole line off, to make it work, to activate it, you use the tab key, right? And tab activates Emmet. All right. Questions around this? I'm going to test you on this, right? Yeah. What was that? I'm making sure that the way we know how it works is we back up. Check this out. So let's say I do this Emmet piece of code, right? And let's say I go back to the bottom here, and I'm using the same code that you are, right? Now, if you don't, if you think this is incorrect, take a look at if I don't have Emmet. Is it working for you?
No.
Okay. Sometimes what happens is, depending on the version of brackets we have, and I've got something, you have to download and install Emmet. Like in this particular case, mine included it. But if you don't know where it is, there's this. Let's go back here for a second. Close it up. If you notice, there's this little building block or Lego brick, if you will, right? If you click on the Lego brick, right? And if I go into extensions, this is one of the extensions I think is well worth getting is Emmet. Type in Emmet with a capital E and click install. It'll be install instead of disable, right? It will install it if it's not there for you already. So type in Emmet, and I did that by clicking this little Lego brick right here. By the way, look at this Bootstrap 3 skeleton. This is cool, right? I can update that too, right? So there's a lot of different things here you can look at. A lot of little extensions you can apply for in Bootstrap. In brackets, right? As you notice, there's tons and tons of them that you can look through. They're all part of the community, right? All right. You try it. Does it work now?
Yeah.
We good now? Okay. So Emmet is what we want to use with a capital E. All right. Again, it saves us time. It's a very common download or extension that we want to use, and it creates our web page third. Number one, when we do our web page, or when we create a web project, which is what I've done here, what's really, really important? Right? First thing to do when you create a web page, or web project, sorry. File structure. It's really, really important. Thank you. And the reason why it's important is because it's like you having a dirty room, right? I don't want to see a dirty room. Not just me. Think about you passing this file off to your buddy, right? Here it is, man. Take it off and see what I'm doing, right? And he looks at your stuff and goes, damn, that's a mess, right? We don't want that, especially when we work with other people, right? So you need to keep a very clean file structure, right? And the second thing is, you need to know the difference between tags and elements, and then attributes. Here's an attribute. Here's a tag, a meta tag. Here's an attribute, right? Almost like a property of the meta tag, right? Another way of saying it, right? An attribute has some kind of value, right? Here's the value. Character set is the attribute. UTF-8 is the value, right? And this tells us how to control the web page. The head. Without a head, the body doesn't know what to do, right? It's a chicken with its head cut off, right? We don't want to not have that. Okay. Here's your exercise. I'm going to say save everything, right? And it's up on Blackboard, right? So if you go to Blackboard, and if you look at weekly learning, and if you go into Module 1, you'll see that there's a couple PowerPoint presentations that talk to the book. And inside there, there's a lab, right, that I want you to take a look at. It should only take you about 20 minutes, right, to do, right? Let's take a look. It's this, right? Using the provided text as your content on the next page. This stuff, right? Attempt to build a simple HTML page that resembles what you see, using only a text editor, in other words, brackets, and then view it in the browser. Examine the attached document, that's the instructions, using only a text editor, build a simple page, and make sure with all the stuff that it's asking you to do, follow the instructions, save the file as index.html on your desktop, right? Open and view the file in the web browser, add the heading Sunbeam T20 Toaster, right, and so on, and then it tells you what to do. Upload your HTML file to the specified location on Blackboard. Now, in Blackboard, you got to put it up in this Lab 1 section. If you finish this today, it's worth 2% of your final mark. Okay? There's bonuses if you can figure this out, believe it or not, right? Bonuses, yeah. You believe it or not, there's bonuses here. So let's take a look at that. What bonus does Tom speak of, right? So I go to the PDF side again, and I'll probably close it off. Okay, let's go back. Well, it says take it further. Insert a subheading element or second level heading with the content automatic beyond belief. Add an image element, figure that out, and you can figure out how to add images to your page or link images to your page by going where? W3 Schools as my API. Or you can look at your book. Or you can look at my PowerPoint presentations. This is all there, right? Figure it out though. I want you to figure out how to visually center the H1 content without using a center element, right? As an extra challenge. If you can do any one of these, I'll give you a bit of a bonus, right? Go. You have some time before the end of class. One thing to note is inside of my lab, there's also the T20 Toaster image, the JPEG. You can also download this to get this piece done. Okay? Now what about people who don't have, I don't see people with laptops who aren't doing it. You don't have a laptop here? You didn't bring one? Huh? You thought? Oh, you don't have one. Okay. So what about anyone else not have a laptop here that can't do the work, can't do the lab today? I see you don't have one. You don't have one. Is it because you don't have it, or is it because? All right, you need to bring it every day because this is like a BYOD kind of room, right? Anyone else? Yeah, same thing with you. So because of that, I'm going to give you until the end of the day. Would you mind? So if you put it together by the end of the day, not instead of end of class, by today, I'll give you the 2%. Okay, if you guys can get that done. And that means for everybody else too. So if you want to get this done by the end of the day, for this particular lab, because it's the first class, and you don't have your laptops, you don't have it yet, whatever, that's okay, right? We can get it done by the end of the day, right? Same thing with you, I guess. All right. So I'll let that, even though it says do end of class, I'll let that go for today. Okay, but please don't forget your laptops, or make sure you have them by the next class. Let's go back. While you're doing that, I will continue to talk about stuff. You don't have to watch, but I've covered a lot of the stuff here in the PowerPoints already. I'm just sneaky in how I did it, right? Some of the things I didn't talk about, for example, some things you don't need to know, like the abbreviation element or the list item element. These are just examples of some predefined elements. I didn't talk about that. I did talk about all this stuff, right? It's the start tag and the end tags. So I've kind of gone through this already with you without going through the PowerPoints, because I feel going through the PowerPoints will bore me to tears if I was a student, right? So I will talk to it, and the PowerPoints are a great reference card, right, to make sure that you know what to do, right? But that's really what it is in a nutshell. The body of the web page, I was trying to see if there's anything else that there's some really good examples of elements, kind of deciding what an element is compared to just a tag. It talks about the full element being the start tag, the end tag, and the content, right? We talked about before, right? Attributes and values. So the attribute, like for example, in our example, we have an attribute that's lang for the HTML tag. Lang is equal to English. en. Lang then would be the attribute. En would be, in this particular case, is something else, but en would be your value. So attributes and values, and there's some predefined or enumerated values that we have to use. We can't just use any value we want, right? A lot of attributes expect a certain range of values that we have to put in there, right? And there's some examples here about how to put together things for URL. The difference between parent and children. I think we talked about how one item is nested within another one. One thing we didn't get to today, which I will try and rehash with you next week as we move forward, is semantic HTML, the idea of semantics. And what does that mean, right? And semantic HTML is, we don't just use, the previous version of HTML had container tags that were used, that were very generic, and they were called div tags. That's all we used to use, div tags, right? But nowadays, sometimes what we want to do is do what's happening here, which is where we say, this is an article, right? And we use article tags to better describe what our content is doing, okay? That's what really, what semantic HTML is all about. And we're going to know more about that. We're going to talk more about semantic HTML and the proper ways of doing things as we move forward, right? Just going to go through here and make sure we covered most of everything else. Things to know, when you create your own HTML page, you want to make sure that you don't have any inappropriate symbols or text inside the page. For example, a dash, that's okay, but it's a pain in the ass. You ever go to a web page and you put a dash in? That's like a surefire way of making mistakes, right? Hey, there's another hint. Never buy a domain with a dash, okay? Please don't do that. If you want to advertise and you want to have your own site, don't buy a domain that has a dash in it. Like, you know, Georgian dash college. That's really bad. It's better Georgian college, one word, right? And always try and buy a domain with the .com. Don't be lured into buying the .ca, .net, .biz, .info, .xyz, whatever. Those are neat, right? And if you want a cheap domain because you want to show off something, that's a neat idea. Sometimes you might get a cheap domain for a year or something like that. But the main domain you always want to buy from a business perspective is .com. If you can't get the .com, don't make the business. Like, that's how important it is right now. Sometimes what I do is I help small business owners create their own business, right? And the first thing I say is, what's your business name, right? They tell me their name. Two things to note. Keep your name small, right? Keep your website small. 2 syllables if you can, right? Or 3, max. Apple, right? I always look at the leaders. Google, right? Why? It's easy for people. Now the problem with that is a lot of these simple names are already gone, right? They're already taken. So if you actually do a search on GoDaddy or someplace else to find a domain that you want to buy, and let's play for a second while you guys are working. For some of you who can't work, so you're not bored out of your skull, right? By the way, this is being recorded, so you can always go back and look at this afterwards, guys. This is why I can do things simultaneously like this while you guys are working. If I go to GoDaddy and I want to look up something like a name, so let's think of a name. You and I, we're going to make a business today for my web design studio. What am I going to call it? Give me a name. What is that?
Coding.
Z1 Coding?
Yeah.
Z1 Coding. Okay, let's try this out. Z1 Coding, like this? Or if you want to put Z1 Coding, like zone code. Zone coding. All right. So if I go look at zone coding, I can make a search on thing. And hey, looking at Z1 Coding or Zone Coding, which is kind of a neat name actually, right? Is available, right? Zone Coding. 3 syllables. That's okay. Passes my test. Name is not too long. It's fairly within a good shape. I don't want to go more than around 10 characters if I can, right? Why? It's a pain in the ass to have a huge website and an email attached to it. Like, you know, Tom at my really freaking long website.com, right? I don't want that. That is really type in to communicate with you, right? So keep it short. That's what I'm saying. Whenever you kind of reserve the domain, right? And if you're reserving a domain, it's going to always suggest things like the zonecoding.ca piece. It's nice to have, but not necessary. Yeah, it shows that you're Canadian and local, and it's an additional $9.99 for the year, but that's only a temporary price. It goes back, it jacks it back up to like $16 a year after time. For example, even this one, it's $11.99 for zonecoding.com, but the real price is $16.99 every year after that, right? So be careful when you buy stuff. And again, GoDaddy is just one place to buy stuff. That's one thing to know. All right, so when we make businesses, we use domains, small names for your site. I encourage you, if you want to try this out, because we're going to try, and I want to have a live, I want you to build some stuff live on the web at some point, right? It might be a good idea for you to reserve your own domain name. I did it for me, right? But my name is huge, right? Tom Siliopoulos is huge. Like, who the hell is going to find me, right? So I kind of did Siliopoulos.com, and I pointed it to my GitHub pages. So Siliopoulos, I say that. If I want to go and I have two things, you can look me up with GitHub. I have a bunch of stuff on GitHub, right? But let's say I go to Siliopoulos, if I can spell my name, .com, right? And I go there. It's going to take me to my, Siliopoulos world, right? Here it is, right? I've kind of pointed it to this this site on GitHub. Actually, this is hosted by GitHub Pages, which you can actually use for free, right? So we'll talk about hosting your stuff. How do we host? There is no Web Design 4 anymore here at the school. It's been gone, right? So we'll talk about other hosting options when we do publishing on the web and how to do that, all right? So this is definitely one way to do that, and HTML5 publishing is the way to go, right? So let's think about this kind of thing when you kind of publish your own stuff. So pick a name. Like sometimes people pick their last name. It's taken, especially if your name is very common. Kayla, what's your last name?
Wiest. W-I-E-S-T.
Wiest.com. I bet you it's taken. Yeah. Oh no, hey, it might be available, but probably $1 million to buy. Let's check this out, right? GoDaddy.
Oh.
Did I spell it wrong?
They're wrong. Yeah, W-I-E-S-T. Yeah.
Definitely gone. Definitely, it's going to be gone. And it tells you like this. Sorry, it's taken, right? So let's try this out. I spelled it wrong. So let's try this out. I'm going to go to your last name, right, .com, and let's say who's got it. Yeah, right? And then someone's squatting. This is what I like to say. This is like squatting, right? Someone's stolen your name, like your last name, and they're squatting on it and hoping that you're going to pay them, right, to get your name, right? What about your whole name, though? That's not a bad idea, right? Because your name is not really big and long, right? So GoDaddy, and let's try that out. Let's go. So Kayla with a K?
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah.
Like this?
Yeah.
So let's try .com and see if that's available. Sometimes it's not available either, right? This one it is, so you might as well take it before it's gone. Maybe you're going to be a superstar one day, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know what? No one, you can't reserve your own name because someone in the room is squat. Keith took it, right?
I just did, actually.
He squatted. It's it. He took it, right? So that you can't
I'll sell
reserve
it.
your own name. You'll sell it for her in the future, right? For a lot of money, right? So reserve your damn name now, right? Before it's gone, right? At least your last name if you can. Last name is the best because that means you represent all people with your last name, right? And they'll all kill you. You're squatting on all these people, right? If you can get it, that's awesome, right? I'm like, the first guy that took my last name. But then again, my last name is like, I'm probably like the only one in Canada, right? So no one has a Greek last name like me. Okay, so that's one thing to do. And again, if you notice, it's $11.99 and again $9.99 for the CA. Once you reserve your name, you can always point your domain to your the host that's going to host your site. And we're going to talk about free hosting services out there that you have to pay nothing for. So all you need to pay is, and this is, I mean, again, it's part of your fees if you want to think about this. Pick a name that you want to use, especially when you do things like kind of upload your final project to me, right? This might be a good example, and it's a great learning experience for you to understand how to use domains, point them at different sites, and so on, and some free hosting services that are out there. We're going to cover that through the course. Now, it's an optional thing. I'm not going to force you to spend any money, right? Because I know what it's like to be a student, right? It's tough. Right? Sometimes even $11.99 is not possible, or there's no credit card available, right? And that's okay too. You don't have to do it, but it's a great opportunity for you to learn how to do it. Any questions around this stuff? We're going to talk about GitHub Pages. GitHub Pages is the free area that you can use. If I go GitHub Pages gives you some free hosting, right? It allows you to host your site free on GitHub, right? Websites for you and your projects, free, right? There's no cost to it. As long as it's a simple site, a one-pager, you're good to go, right? That's one. And the other one that you may want to look at, which I guess I'm posting up here, is Heroku, right? Heroku.com, right? Heroku.com is also you can go. I think it's a great little service. It's it's a cloud service that's free, right? And one other one that I like to use the most is Microsoft Azure, right? They give you some free options for students. And we're going to talk about that as we go for some cloud services that we can use to host our sites. Because one thing is the business of actually creating HTML pages, but actually seeing them live. Well, that's a whole other thing, right? So that's what we got to get into by the end. That's my goal anyway. Okay. That's pretty much it for me in a nutshell. Any questions around this stuff while you guys finish off your exercise?
I was just wondering how you want it to be uploaded.
Good question. How do we upload this thing? You go into the lab exercise and you upload it there. There should be a space in the lab piece, right? So up on Blackboard. So I just want your, you can zip up all your files, right? If you want to put them in, and just put it up on Blackboard like that. That's the way to do it, okay? So zip up your files and put them up on Blackboard. One other thing I want to mention before we go, I did have a assignment that I put together. This is Scott's assignment that he has. It's worth 10% of your mark. It's due week 3. You can't do it now because you're not ready. But there's nothing that's going to stop you from actually looking at it and finding out what it's all about, right? So if I was to go to the assignment documentation here, right, which I've included, right, we're going to describe this over the next week or so too. Next week we're going to talk more at length about this. But there's nothing wrong with starting this off. It's due a couple weeks from now. This is not a big assignment, right? It's worth 10% of your mark. But take a look at the instructions, and it would be a great thing to do to start on it. Actually, it'd be even awesome if you could finish it by next week, even though it's not due 2 weeks from now, right? It's great to finish it or get as much done as possible so we can talk about it next week together. I can take a look at it, give you some critique before you hand it in, right? So it's up there. I'm not going to talk to it because the instructions are very clear, right? But not this week anyway, but next week I'll go into it for people who haven't started it, right? And I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Select a particular song that has some kind of meaning to you and construct a properly structured HTML file or page with a doc type and so on. Type a consensus but meaningful title, element in the head, and so on. It's almost like what we're doing here with our exercise file to the next level. And then it kind of gives you the evaluation criteria right here, right? So this is how you're going to be evaluated. It's not a free one like this exercise today. If you finish this exercise today, you get 2% That's awesome if you get it done, right? Like by the end of the day today, right? This one requires me to go through and check your stuff. Like I'm going to go check and make sure that all this stuff is done. This is due 3 weeks from now, like week 3. This is a lot of time for this. This is like a small, simple assignment to get done. You can get this done by next week. The more you get done with me next week, guys, the more I can give you feedback and critique, and the faster I can mark your stuff and get marks back to you, right? So it's not due for a couple weeks, but nothing's going to stop you from getting it done. Really now, that's it in a nutshell. That's it for me. I'm going to see you next week back in sunny at 8 o'clock. Hopefully it's sunny, right? Otherwise, any questions before we end for the day? All right, great. Thanks so much.
Tom?
Yep. Give me 1 second
No problem.
while I stop the whole experience here before because I'm still firing on all cylinders. All right.